This episode of Raiders Fan Radio is brought to you by DeadPiratesSports.com. That's Raider gear for the Raider family. Check out DeadPiratesSports.com. Raiders Fan Radio. You're listening to Sonny and Murph from the Dago Dungeon. That's right, a podcast by Raiders fans for Raiders fans, the only fans that matter.
Touchdown! Kenny Stabler goes all the way!
We miss you, we love you, and we'll see you in the Hall of Fame.
When you have great coaches, then after you have great coaches, you get great players. You have a great organization, and you tell them one thing. Just win, baby.
I love this team. I think this team can win.
What is up, Raider Nation? Your old buddy Murph back here once again for another solo trip through Raider Nation. That's right. Sonny, he will rejoin us. He's not gone forever. He's just gone for a little bit. Had some work and family priorities take over, and so he had to step away for a week, but he will be back, rest assured, for the next episode of Raiders Fan Radio. In the meantime, we wanted to bring you episode number 67. That's right. This could be the, Russell, Maryland episode of Raiders Fan Radio, wearing number 67, played for the Raiders in 96, 97. I think 97 was the only year he actually wore the number 67, but probably more importantly, although we always go with player numbers, you could go with the 1967 Raiders as the team that won, of course, the AFL championship by whipping up over the Houston Oilers 40-7 and going on to face the Green Bay Packers in the second Super Bowl. So we'll call it episode 67, the AFL Championship edition of here on Raiders Fan Radio. So wanted to bring you an interview this week. Anybody that's been a longtime fan of the Raiders, especially in the Bay Area, knows the name Steve Corkran. Steve is a longtime contributor to many different newspapers, Contra Costa Times. I became familiar with him through the San Jose Mercury News, growing up in San Jose, and became familiar with him that way. Also, he was one of the first guys, too, that really kind of embraced Twitter in a way that was really interactive. You know, Twitter can be so many different things, and he was one of those guys that really interacted with the people that followed him. He does a lot of chats even still to this day. In fact, our interview was running right up against one of his live chats, so he does a really good job of interacting with Raider Nation on the regular, and of course, he came on the show to talk about his new venture, which is Raiders Snake Pit at RaidersSnakePit.com. So plenty of information about his new venture, plenty of information about the Raiders. I think you're going to enjoy this. We cover everything from players on the field to, of course, lots about Gruden, as Corkran was a co-writer of the book Al Davis Behind the Shield, and covered a ton about during the John Gruden years in that book. And then Corkran was just one of those guys that covered him firsthand. So anyways, really cool, really fun, relevant stuff. And so we're glad to bring you that episode, or that interview, here on episode number 67. And we hope you enjoy it. All right, Raider Nation, on the line with us, we have a man that has covered the Oakland Raiders since 1995 when they returned to Oakland. He's worked for the Contra Costa Times, the Oakland Tribune, and the San Jose Mercury News. We are blessed and thankful to welcome in Steve Corkran to the show. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thanks for having me on, Murph. I'm excited to be on.
Steve, we know that you've covered the Raiders for a long time. You've covered the NFL, frankly, for a long time, covered your fair share of games and, of course, Super Bowls. And and also authored the book, the fabulous book that came out recently, Al Davis Behind the Shield. But most recently, you've started a new venture, and it's called the Raiders Snake Pit. I became a subscriber just this morning and going over all the content. Steve, what a fantastic venture. Tell Raider Nation a little bit about it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's. I guess I just can't get the Raiders out of my blood, Murph. You hit the nail on the head. I've been covering these guys in some capacity since they came back to Oakland, and I kind of stepped away to do the book for the past couple of years, and now it's over. So I decided to get back into it, and I joined forces with longtime colleague Bill Williamson. We used to work together at the Contra Costa Times, and then he left in the late 90s, went to Seattle. He covered Seahawks, and then he went to, I'm not 100% on the order, but he went to Appleton, Wisconsin. He covered the Packers, Brett Favre and those guys in their heyday, and then he went to Minnesota, covered Randy Moss and Dante Culpepper, Chris Carter when they were riding high. And then he went to Denver. He covered the Broncos, and then he made his way back out here to cover the Raiders. So we said, let's make a go of this. And what we want to do is it's just the two of us at this point, but we see that the Raiders now are they're beyond relevant. They're in the national conversation again. And then with John Gruden coming back, even more so. And, of course, they're about to move to Las Vegas in a couple of years. So we said, that this is a team that everybody's talking about. And yet more and more papers are going under, or they're letting go of their writers. And there'll probably be a couple more in the before next season. So we said, well, why don't we get this thing going now? And we'll do the best we can as a two-man operation. And we'll begin to add writer after writer. And the goal is to have at one place where we're at this site, to have all the top Raider writers in the world. And so when you want to read anything about the Raiders, you're going to have guys that have been following the team for upward 50 years and who have been covering it for 25 to 30 years each. So if we're able to pull that off, and I think we will, it'll take a little bit of time, but we're making progress. If we're able to do that, then no one will be able to match us in terms of Raider experience. And so we want to bring that Raider fans, and that was the impetus for starting the site.
Well, the model is fantastic, and, it seems to be that that's where true journalism is going. And, not to disparage anything that other folks are doing, but I think that there is a certain responsibility that it comes with accurate journalism and with guys that are in the know, and the guys that are truly connected with the team and the organization. And that's what you guys are. And it is well worth it when you look at the content that's available on the site. Before we get into the specifics of it, though, and I want to ask you about a couple of the articles that I read this morning, but also talk about the affiliation with the Stabler Foundation and how that works with the site.
Yeah, we decided that we said that we would like to join forces with someone with long ties to the Raiders, and that we'd like to help out. We would like to for this to be not only our main work, but we would like it to benefit a worthy cause. So we thought long and hard about it, and we had a handful of them that we contemplated, and we decided that with Kenny, it just passing away, about a year or two ago, and going in the Hall of Fame as well, we said that's perfect. Plus, with the CTE it being so prevalent now in the game and in the news, we said that that's perfect. So we got a hold of his daughters, and we solicited their support, and they said we would love that. So that's part of the beauty of this, is that part of your subscription cost goes straight to the Stabler Foundation. And so they're thrilled, we're thrilled, and it benefits a good cause. So thank you for pointing that out.
So let's talk a little bit about the site itself. There was a couple of stories that I read that really got my attention, and I want to totally give it away. That way folks are going to want to seek this stuff out and join and become members of Raider Snake Pit so they can see everything on their own. But A couple of the things that you talked about on the site, one of them is that your most recent article, I believe, is about how Gruden holds his players accountable, about how the excuses and the reasons for things that get floated out, not just with the Raiders organization, but with a lot of football teams. Those things aren't going to fly with him. Can you talk a little bit about that, kind of expand on that, about maybe what different of an approach as far as that goes when we're talking about accountability of a guy like Gruden versus what's happened here in the recent past?
Absolutely. If you just look to the Eagles, who just won Super Bowl, you saw at the parade that several of the players went out of their way to point out the people that doubted them, and it's so you always wind up hearing these same old cliches about it's us against the world. We shocked the world. No one respects us. We're underdogs and all of that, and it's just talk, and it's a way to motivate themselves. With Gruden, in the 4 years that I covered him, he never once used anything that the media said. He recognized at a real early age, which showed how special he was at a young age, is that he got the whole thing. He didn't get just football, Murph. He got how it worked, meaning that players aren't like anybody. They're like kids. They're like people at work, always looking for an excuse. And if you look hard enough, there's excuses out there, and but Gruden recognized that the only way to build a team and to have an accountable team, and or there not to be any chemistry issues or divisive forces, is that you can't blame the officials, you can't blame the weather, you can't blame that the league has it out to get the Raiders. Is that he always took the opposite approach. Said, look, that yes, there was a controversial call in the game, and I thought that it went against us. I don't agree with the call, but that's not the reason we lost the game. Our job is to make more of the plays that were available to us, so it doesn't get to the point where one call can be the difference in the game. And so he really underscored that when they got to the tough game, the game we all know they lost in the playoffs to the Patriots. Even after that game, as mad as he was, and he's still mad, one of the things that he preached to his players in the locker room right on the heels of that game was, do not blame the officials. So that we're above that. And, of course, the players did, and they still do and all that stuff. But, the point was that he was never going to give them an excuse. Work harder. More plays. Don't put it in the hands of the officials. Media, anything they write has no effect on what you do out here. And it really helps a team if you can get them to buy into that. And so that's something that he's always – and so if you look back at this past year, and the point I made was that now if you go back, now all of a sudden you're hearing all these players and you're hearing rumblings about, we didn't have an offensive identity. We struggled with that. We had a new system. We had players hurt, and we had a coach that was brought in to lead the defense, and the defense was the big issue. It's like you will not hear any of that under Gruden. Is that if he hears if he hears if that happened more than once, you will be out of there. Is that he wants you to be focused on what you have to do, and that he believes if you work hard enough and you do things the right way, that the results are going to come. Is that people aren't out to get you. So if something doesn't go right, work harder, find a better way to get it done, but don't stop and blame others. And so he's big that way.
Also, in the article, you mentioned about David Carr and about how he's essentially been a sounding board, and he's been a voice of criticism of the Raiders and of various things. And an interesting dynamic is starting to develop in that, with the closeness that he has with his brother, I kind of feel like that the things that come out of David are by proxy thoughts that Derek has, but Derek in a press conference and his facing the media or whatever is very, everything's on him. He takes the blame, as a good leader should. But do you sense that will that dynamic still? I mean, David is part of the media, so do you think that will kind of continue on, or do you think that will change at all with Gruden's influence?
If it begins to, if it takes on a negative tone, Gruden will either get a hold of David Carr, or he will make it plain and clear to Derek Carr that, look, there are certain things that stay in-house here. And the problem with it, as you said, is that right or wrong, perception becomes reality here. That old phrase, and it applies here, is that if David Carr is saying something and he's not in the locker room, well, he's not guessing at what's going on. He's hearing it from somewhere. And even if it's not from his brother, who is the quarterback of the team, the face of the team, people are going to assume that it is. So it's incumbent upon Derek Carr to say, hey, look, stop it. It's a new coach here. He doesn't like excuses. I don't like you talking about what went wrong with the team. Let us do that, or it's got to stay in-house. And I would expect that to happen. So, but yet he came out again last week, and he talked to a guy from the Associated Press, a colleague of mine, and he was talking about how there was all kind of breakdowns, and a lot went wrong. Our team had won 12 games the previous year, and so that doesn't help anything. So one of the Carrs or both will hear about that from Coach Gruden here soon.
Another one of the pending issues for Coach Gruden coming in is in another article you mentioned that you wrote about 9 of the 25 Raider starters, so 11 on both sides of the ball, plus long snapper, kicker, and punter. 9 of those 25 positions are pretty much locked up. The rest of them, there's some uncertainty there. What do you? I know we're very early in the off season. We've got free agency yet to happen. The draft but what do you feel are some of the more key positions? Raider Nation, we're famous for overreacting and saying, "Oh, we need a middle linebacker. Oh, we need a corner. Oh, we need a." What is it that you see that the Raiders truly need to address early on in the off season as far as needs on the field?
Oh, it's easy. Is that you have to and we can talk about how these rank, but in no particular order. You have to identify who the lead running back is. We know it's not Jalen Richard or DeAndre Washington or Elijah Hood, so it becomes first thing you have to answer, do you want Marshawn Lynch back as the lead back? If that's being addressed right now, if the answer is no, or if Lynch doesn't want to come back, he could retire as well. Then you have to decide what kind of back do we want as a lead back. And so we address that. Then it gets to the point where you look at free agency, and probably the most attractive option at this point would be Carlos Hyde. But the Niners are going to want to bring him back. So then you look at if Pittsburgh doesn't want to pay the money to Le'Veon Bell, then agency, but then he's going to come in at 12, 13, 14 million a year. So that's how this process works. They're in the midst of all of that. So the next domino with the running back is Lynch, is meeting with Lynch, seeing if he wants to play, seeing if Gruden likes him, because he's never met him. So he wants to gain a feel for what he's like, see where his heart is, see where the mind is, and then he'll go from there. But then you go to receiver. Same thing here. You've got Amari Cooper. He's the only one that's guaranteed to be on roster for next year out of the receiving corps. So then you look and say, well, which are the guys that are worth bringing back? Well, Michael Crabtree, if it's the Crabtree from 2015-16, if it's the one from last year, maybe not. And he got a little pushed out of shape at the end of the year when he wasn't playing much. Was that Jack Del Rio? Was that Todd Downing? Was that Michael having a little bit of a hissy fit? That has to be ironed out. Then you move on to offensive line. You've got the interior of the line rock solid. It's as good as any guard tandem center in the NFL. But then you've got issues at the tackle. Even Donald Penn is that he'll be 35. He's coming up the foot injury, had surgery, didn't play that well, even though he made it to the Pro Bowl. We all know that can be a sham, but so you got
the best
issues
of who's available,
there.
right?
Yeah, so you got Marshall Newhouse on the right side. He held down fourth this year because that's the best option that they had. So you could have both new tackles, and then you go to linebackers, just about all of them. Maybe Nicholas Morrow. He could crack the starting lineup. They have to decide if they want to bring back Navarro Bowman. And then the big issue is at cornerback. Again, you've got one of the cornerbacks is guaranteed to be on roster, and they've already cut one. They cut David Amerson. So he had been a starter the previous couple of years. So now you've got Gary Conley, who's going to be on the roster, first-round pick from 2017, but he was hurt, and so he only appeared in a couple games. But he has the potential to be a starter, so he's going to get a long look. He's going to be on roster. Beyond that, T.J. Carey, free agent, if they bring him back, probably has special teamer, extra back. Sean Smith, he's due a lot of money, has already been paid a lot of money. They have to decide which Sean Smith is the guy that they're going to get, the one that struggled for most of the past 2 years, or the one that looked good the last 4 or 5 games when John Pagano took over for Kenny Norton. So a lot of questions, and if they opt to just keep the guys that we say are locks, well, then you've got a lot of positions to fill, from the starters to the backups as well. So you can see where this is headed. So it's a sequential thing. You have to identify who are the locks, and then what are you going to do? Returning players. Do you want them back? Do they want to be back? Would we be better off to cut a player who can help us, like a Michael Crabtree, and save on salary cap, $8.5, $9 million, or whatever it is, and so on. So a lot of things to be answered, and that's what Gruden's doing right now, and he's probably putting in 18-hour days.
And he's got a lot to consider too with the upcoming signings, right? I mean, I know Amari Cooper's had his struggles with hanging on to the football, but aside from that, he's due a big payday coming up. Khalil Mack obviously is due a big payday coming up. So do you feel that a lot of these decisions on these veteran players like Crabtree, that those salaries will come into play? Heck, Janikowski even, right?
Yes and no. Is that you have to remember, if you look at the Raiders right now, they have $28 million in cap room, but part of that goes away to sign the draft class, so call that maybe $6 million. And then if you sign Khalil Mack to an extension, a long-term extension, you can backload the heck out of that thing. And I think Khalil would even be in favor of that, because if say it's a 6-year deal, is that if it's backloaded, meaning that he gets the bulk of it in the latter years, they're going to be playing in a state, I guess, for lack of a better word. I was trying to think of the name of the stadium, Las Vegas Stadium, we'll call it this. That they'll be playing there where there's no income tax.
Right.
So
right.
So he could get an extra maybe 10-11% on his money if he waits, if it comes on the back end. So they have to decide how that's going to be structured. It probably will be heavily backloaded, since they don't have a ton of cap room. They've got enough to operate, and they've got the flexibility to create more if they get rid of Lynch and Crabtree and others. And so if they're going to have enough room. But yes, Mack is at the top of the list. They want to get it done with him now. So that's being worked on.
Yeah, he's got to be. I mean, he's got to be a Raider for life. I think between him and Derek both, it's a necessity for sure. Before we let you go, I do want to ask you a little bit about the book. The book is Al Davis, Behind the Raiders Shield. You wrote this with Bruce Kebrick and John Kingdon. We're big fans of the book. We've talked about it frequently on our show, and in fact, we were glad to have John Kingdon even on to talk about the book when it came out. I want to ask you, there's so much in the book, but I do want to ask you specifically about Gruden. You covered Gruden directly, and as you mentioned, with him coming back, it's the national spotlight. It's such a big deal. With a couple of things that stood out to me, not only when they announced it, but when you hear about the $100 million and all this kind of stuff, it seems to be so counter what Al would have done and what Al would have endorsed and what Al's behaviors. And clearly Mark Davis at times is his father's son. And then clearly at times he's moving his own direction, doing things different from his dad. What do you think Al Davis, what was the Al Davis response? Does any of this even come close to ever happening if Al Davis is still alive?
With the Gruden situation, perhaps, because I think Al would have recognized that, to have a good coach at this time, that it's just a cost of doing business, is that he wasn't averse to paying the player salaries that were out of whack. So I think with the coach that he would have come around. But you hit upon a pretty salient point there, is that with Mark, is that he's actually doing a lot of things that his father would not have, for the express reason to show that he is his own man. Is that this is a guy who really, up until his father passed away, was known as Al's son, and that was it. It wasn't Mark the former player, Mark the anything. It was just, here's Al's son. Well, now he's the owner of the Raiders, and he's trying to make his own mark. So on his ledger, he's got stadium now. He brought back Gruden, and he's done a lot of things that you look and you say it's a direct response, I guess, for lack of a better word, to what his dad wouldn't have done, and he wanted to do it to make a point. He interviewed Mike Shanahan, for crying out loud. Al never would have done that. That was the arch enemy. He's brought back Marcus Allen. Al never would have done that. So he's going out of his way to show that he is his own man, while still paying loose homage to his father.
Well, the book is great, and if you ever want to get an insight into the mind of Al Davis, check out the book. It's Al Davis, Behind the Raiders Shield. One of the things that I thought was so neat about it is that it's not it's not linear storytelling, that it talks about moments and times of Al's life, and it talks about the stories firsthand. And I thought that was really a neat approach to the book, and especially in those Gruden chapters where, the title of the chapter is John Gruden, the rock star, right? And about how it was the observed experiences that you all had while that was during that time of the Raiders. And so do you think that are we looking at a return to form there, or are we getting a different John Gruden than we did back when you were covering him the first time?
I think you're going to get mixtures. That this is a guy that's been out of the game for 9 years. He studied the game. He approaches it a different way. As he pointed out in the news conference, he's been to every team's facility now. So he's had a chance to see how they operate. He's got behind the walls. So he now can take a different approach. He's seen how they practice, how they watch film, how they grade players, all kinds of things that he wouldn't have had access to. So he can apply that to how he coaches, how he makes decisions now, how he runs practices. So he'll be a different coach in a lot of respects. And then also the game has changed. And that's one of the things that why he was hesitant to come back, is that, I had some conversations with him over the years at games, and he says, he goes, he said that I've got the urge. He said, the problem is, he goes, I hate the losing. He goes, anytime I go down the locker room and I walk into the, losing locker room, he goes, it all comes flooding back. He goes, I hate that feeling. He goes, I don't want to deal with that again. And he said also the rule changes, is that he's a guy that likes to practice. He would practice 10 hours a day. Well, they were practicing twice a day with pads on back when he was here. Now he's coming back to an NFL where you're allowed, whatever it is now, 15 padded practices a year, whatever, and basically one practice a day, and training camp isn't as long, and it's not as hard. So he's going to struggle with that, but I think he'll compensate by just watching more film and drawing up more plays. But he'll do okay. I mean, he's not going to get broadsided by anything. His brother was coaching Washington, so they chat off, and he knows exactly what's going on in the NFL now. So he'll adjust, and I think he'll be better for it.
Well, Steve, we really appreciate your time. Really, thank you so much for coming on the show here on Raiders Fan Radio. Y'all check out Raiders. Check out RaidersSnakePit.com. Great new site. Check out the book, Al Davis Behind the Raiders Shield. You can find it on Amazon, anywhere you get your books. Just great stuff. So thank you again for joining us here on Raiders Fan Radio. Is there anywhere else we want to tell people to find you, Twitter or anything like that?
Twitter and Instagram is at Cork on the NFL, at Cork on the NFL. And then we also have a Twitter handle at RaidersSnakePit.com.
Fantastic. Well, again, we can't thank you enough for joining us here on Raiders Fan Radio, and have a good rest of the day.
All right. Well, thank you, Murph. Appreciate it.
Hey, boys and girls, you got Uncle Mosh here from Raiders Fan Radio telling you about DeadPiratesSports.com's latest amazing offer. That's right, Captain Darkside's Treasure Chest Fan Box. They're a welcome idea for all Raider fans. They make a great gift idea. That's something all of us Raiders fans want, is more Raiders swag. And where are you going to get better swag than from Captain Darkside's Treasure Chest? These treasure chests include shirts, Raider hats, Raider merchandise, tons and tons of other Raider accessories. Captain Darkside's treasure chests are full of awesome Raider gear. They come in 3 sizes to choose from. They got the small ones, the medium ones, and the large ones. $29.99, $59.99, and $99.99. Infants, kids, and special collectors boxes with autographed player merchandise are also available. And when you buy a fan box, you're automatically entered in a special contest and giveaways for life. You know, like we are Raiders fans for life. Plus, some of these random boxes have gold coins in them. If you get a gold coin in your box, you're an instant winner of cool random Raider gear. As an added bonus, every purchase you will receive in your email all the cool, informative, and latest breaking Raider news from Raiders Fan Radio every month at no additional charge. Go on, sign up, get your hands on Raiders Captain Darkside's Treasure Chest boxes. DeadPiratesSports.com.